Hello, and welcome to Model Aviation Live. I'm your host, Jay Smith, executive editor of Model Aviation and Park Pilot magazines. And I'm excited to talk to you, firstly, a few things about what things are happening at AMA and the magazine. For instance, currently here in Muncie, Indiana, we have Camp AMA going on. Today's the last day where we had kids from across the country come in and further their flying skills. So it's been really exciting to be part of that. Lee Ray, our social media manager, came in from Texas, and his son is part of the camp, and he's taking part in that. On the magazine side, if you watched the show previously, I mentioned that I had the great opportunity to interview Tom Schultz of the band Boston, the keyboard player, the guitar player, and the founder of Boston. And who doesn't like Boston, right? I mean, so many great songs over the years. At least personally, I'm a big fan. So Tom has been flying model airplanes for 50 years, and I had the opportunity to interview him. So I just finished my article on Tom. It talks about his flying career. It also talks a little bit about, obviously, his modeling career. So I'm really excited for everyone to see that in an upcoming issue. That will actually be in the issue that you get next month. We'll have the article on Tom Schultz. Another neat thing is I did a review on the RC Plane Stands Classic 2. It's a floor standing stand that you could fold up and use it as a tabletop, or it has casters and you can work on it while standing. So it's made out of birch plywood. It's really, really nice. So I'm excited to share that with you as well. I mean, we all like to work on our planes with some kind of cradle or stand, so you can look forward to seeing that next month as well. I also wanted to share with you 2 weeks ago today and over the weekend, I was at Wonderfest, and I did mention that as well in a previous show. And I wanted to share a few photos with you of Wonderfest. So this is some of the models that were on display at Wonderfest. The Chewbacca, the gentleman who made that spent 4 hours a day for 3 weeks every day. He spent 4 hours every day. Right next to that is the Death Dealer by Frank Fazetta, and he's at Fazetta's grave, like paying tribute. And the reason I'm showing you that is because I painted a statue of that. Not that one, but I painted for my airbrushing class. I painted a statue of the Death Dealer, which you'll see in a minute. So just to give you a context, that's what it looks like. And that was created by Frank Frazetta. He did the artwork. And then we've got obviously Frankenstein with the Bride of Frankenstein trick-or-treating, and obviously everybody knows who Snoopy is. So those are just a few pictures from Wonderfest. I think I've got a few more just to kind of share with you a little bit of the show. The one on the far right, that actually involves our guest today. So the Star Trek mask that you can see on the far right of the far right picture, that mask was actually made by our guest. And the gentleman in the photo owns a lot of props, like the Cylon helmet you see there. And he's a friend of our guests. And obviously, this Godzilla was about 3 feet tall. And then we have the old Red Baron car. I've actually got a die-cast version of the car. And that was done by a gentleman who works for Amazing Figure Modeler, which I've become friends with them since 2018. We do like magazine swaps. So I have a few of their magazines here. And so I give them Model Aviations and Model Aviation magazines, and they provide me with their magazines. It really is helpful to see what other magazines are doing. And then I was really impressed by this, the house from the movie Psycho, because it actually has a piece of the real house. On the left side is actually a piece of the real house. So I just wanted to share, I think there may be more. I just wanted to share a few pictures just so you could see. This was an amazing diorama of Shin Godzilla. You can also see in the background, there's many, many tables of models on display. Okay, there's my project. So this is what I worked on Friday. My airbrushing class, I got the compressor you see on the right, the airbrush you see on the right. It was sponsored by Blackheart Models, who made the Death Dealer that I painted, and it was sponsored by Badger Airbrush. So I got the compressor and the airbrush, and that is me about halfway through painting my statue. And as I mentioned in the previous picture, that to show you what the Death Dealer looks like, but that's part of him. So I learned a lot. I learned some dry brushing techniques. I learned some airbrushing techniques. So it was really fun to attend the class. They have classes on Fridays before the show, and so I wanted to kind of share that with you as well. Uh, my guest today, before we bring Steve out, it's an interesting story how I found out that he was an AMA member. I was watching the movie Fright Night, the 1985 vampire film, the Vampire Next Door film with Roddy McDowall in it and many other people. And I watched You're So Cool, Brewster. And that is the special feature, like the making of. And I saw Steve Neill. He was one of the people that was interviewed because he worked on creature effects and special effects. And he was at his workshop, and behind him on his desk, he had amazing models like a Starship Enterprise and 2001 models. And he also had an AMA sticker. And I paused it as I was watching it. And this was just recently. And I paused it while I was watching it. And I said, that's an AMA sticker, and I thought he must have flown airplanes in the past or currently does. So the next day I looked him up in our database. Sure enough, he was an AMA member, current AMA member. So I reached out to him via email. And since then we've formed a friendship. I've talked to him on the phone a few times. And so he's actually in the new issue, which you'll have digitally. Here's our new issue. And this is obviously the July issue. You have access to it digitally, and print is just going to be starting to arrive in mailboxes. And I interviewed him on the back page for I Am the AMA. So it's perfect timing. And I'm really excited to introduce you all to Steve Neill. And, this gentleman has worked in TV and movies. He's worked on Planet of the Apes, Ghostbusters, Star Trek, Fright Night. I mean, so many different things. And we'll talk some about that. And we'll talk some about his modeling. So I'm excited to welcome Steve Neill to the show. Hi, Steve.
Hi, AJ.
You have just the best backdrop. I mean, mine's not too bad. I've got some Daleks from Doctor Who, but your backdrop is amazing.
It's not well lit, and there's no airplanes hanging from the ceiling anymore because I brought most of them home where, on the weekends I can work on them. And but I build here because there's just not the room at home to build that there is in this 2,000 square foot place, which has been largely taken over by model aviation and rocketry and model kits and the masks that we do. So
right. Well, I know very well how model airplanes can take up a lot of space. Obviously, hanging them from the ceiling helps, but they definitely can occupy a lot of space. So I thought maybe we would delve, Steve, a little bit into your experiences with movie and TV. Talk a little bit about that, and then from there we'll move on and talk about your modeling experience in RC airplanes, and you've done boats and submarines, and you do slot cars. But so obviously, when I found out that you were a member after I watched the documentary behind Fright Night, I went and found your YouTube page, and I saw some of your videos where you talk about 2001, Star Trek, and even Planet of the Apes that really influenced you. So if you could, maybe just talk a little bit about that and how that led you to the career that you chose.
Sure. Well, since I was a kid, my hobby was looking at the stars at night and watching airplanes fly. I was hooked, anything in the sky, anything that flew, I wanted to know everything there was to know about it. And so naturally I was interested in science fiction. I liked horror too, Universal monsters, hammers, all that kind of stuff. But really my favorite stuff was stuff about trips to space, most of all. And of course, in high school, Star Trek came on the air. I remember watching it and saying, "Oh my God, this is so great! A show about us in the future, not like Star Wars where it's another galaxy far, far away. This is us. This is something to look forward to," which was the whole idea behind Star Trek. And of course, then 2001: A Space Odyssey came out, and this is all the short version. A close friend of mine in high school said, "You got to see this movie. It's better than Star Trek." Well, it's kind of like comparing apple and oranges, but it got my attention. And so I got on the Greyhound bus and went into San Francisco and saw it at the Cinerama there that they had, the Golden Gate Cinerama. And the way it was meant to be seen, with the intermission and the curtains with the lion on it separating, and it just blew my mind. I wanted to know everything I could find out about making a film like that, its director, and which inevitably led to me taking up independent filmmaking or amateur filmmaking in high school and college, which led to my working at the American Zoetrope in San Francisco, where I became friends with Francis Ford Coppola and knew George Lucas. And that was the environment that I grew up in. That was my film school. I quit college, went there, helped out for free. I even met Arthur C. Clarke there. I met all kinds of amazing people there, Sidney Poitier and Mario Puzo, and just an endless amount of people, which eventually the facility shut down and everybody moved to LA. I took an interest after seeing Planet of the Apes, of course, too, in recreating those makeups. And since I had artistic background, sculpting skills, I learned how to do that work. And I went to a convention in San Francisco, and someone there said, you ought to come to LA and show people what you're doing. There are not many people doing what you do. You might be able to get work down there. And I thought, well, this would be a great way to get into the industry. And that's what I did. I came down to LA. I made prosthetics of Spock ears. I made prosthetics of ape appliances. I went to conventions. I made people up. I got invited as a guest to the conventions to do Planet of the Apes makeups and put ears on people, because I did it the way the studios were doing it. And that led to me meeting Gene Roddenberry and Majel Barrett, Greg Jean, who just passed recently, I'm sad to say, a lot of other really great people in the industry. And this got me into the studio doors. You know, I met Rick Baker. We became friends. He gave me a few jobs he didn't want to do. But somewhere in there, I got a call from Fred Phillips, who I had met, who is the senior makeup artist on the original Star Trek series and Outer Limits. Those are his two big claims to fame. So he was a wonderful human being. He called me up one day and asked if I wanted to work on Star Trek, and I thought he was pulling my leg. But he explained to me that his eyesight really wasn't quite what it used to be, and he needed help. And would you like to come down? I'd like to have you do Leonard's ears to start. And of course, you know, Spock was always my favorite character. It was just like a fantasy coming true. I go back in my mind to being in high school, getting the book, The Making of Star Trek, which I think everybody had, and looking at the pictures and the sets and thinking, wouldn't it be cool to be there? And there I was. One morning after one phone call at the Gower entrance going into the studio. And I see you have the pictures of the ear molds up. But before that, Fred, the first day, brought out Leonard's ears from the original TV series. He had a pair of them that were never been used. They're in perfect condition because it was 1978. The ears were in good condition. He said, I need you to reproduce these exactly. He gave me Leonard's ear castings, and I started doing it. And I don't know, it got to be kind of late, like 7 o'clock or so, and this shadow appeared over me, kind of blocking my light. And I hear, are those my ears? And sure enough, I turned around and looked up, and there was Mr. Nimoy. So these are moments in your career that you never forget. These were like spectacular moments. You never become jaded to things like that. And I never did. And of course, that led to me working on the show and doing some of the aliens in there and that kind of thing. That was amazing. Somewhere in there, I also got called to work for a few days on the Planet of the Apes TV show, which is where I first met Roddy McDowall, who I'd later work on Laser Blast and then Fright Night. So that's kind of the short story how I got involved in all this and how my career started.
So with Leonard Nimoy, so you made his ears for the Star Trek motion picture. So would you then put them on? Would you apply them every day of filming, or did you just mold the ears?
No. V. Neal, who some of you will know, she's a very famous, successful makeup artist in Hollywood. We were an item back in the early 70s. We worked on a film together with Margot Kidder and Christopher Walken. They changed the name of it. I can't recall what it's called, but it was a Western. That was an amazing experience. But during that time, the makeup union had a special deal where if you got 60 days, it was called the 60-day wonder, on any motion picture, they would let you in the union without a test, without having to get 120 days, without having to go through all these hurdles to get the group one to be picked. V got that. I didn't. So when I went to work on Star Trek, I couldn't apply the years because I wasn't on that list. Only if they had exceeded the main list could they go to the secondary list to bring in other makeup artists. That was not me. It was okay for me to work in the lab and sculpt masks and things and ears, but not put them on the set. So I said, well, V's in on the 60-day wonder program, Fred. She could come in and do the applications, which she did. And she was masterful at it and still is. And so that shot her career right off, that film right there. And so I would work on union pictures and she would put the prosthetics on, So, and I never did fully get all the way into the makeup union, as it were. And I just had my own shop, my own lab. I did lots of independent films, but I did union stuff too. But I just had union makeup artists wrangle the prosthetics for me. And I could operate creatures, no problem. That's why in Ghostbusters, I'm in many scenes in Ghostbusters operating the creatures I worked on. Like that hand grabbing her in the face, that was me. And I sculpted the other two arms. I coordinated with the other two puppeteers, and of course with the people building the chairs. There were 3 different chairs, and we spent about 3-4 days shooting that whole sequence. So it was a great time. I really, at the time, they were doing 2010 at Boss Films, and they were doing this, and I got hired to work on this. When I'm down there, in the big building over there, they're building the Discovery, the Leonov, and I wanted to be doing that stuff, but I didn't think Ghostbusters would ever amount to anything. I just thought it'd, be one of these films, and little did I know that I'd be signing autographs a few weeks ago from an autograph company. It's so popular, and I'm very proud to have been part of Ghostbusters. I really am. I'm flattered by the fans. I love their enthusiasm about it. And the film was okay to me, but it's the fans' love of it that's made it have more value to me. It's really quite amazing. It's like that with Star Trek too, but I never thought it would be that way with Ghostbusters. So, and of course, 2010 didn't do so well. So yeah,
kind of worked out. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. But I still got the sculpt in the end, the Star Child anyway. I was supposed to sculpt the Star Child for 2010. They had another guy do it, and they didn't make it accurate. And I don't know if you were online, you saw the Star Child that I did, that Adam Savage ended up with.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah. So, I've got one too. In fact, I have it right here. I could bring it over.
If you'd like, feel free.
Yeah. It's a little on the heavy side, but not too bad. It's made exactly the way the original was, and Adam Savage helped me get all the right pictures of it and everything to work from the actual one. I don't think I can get back far enough to get it all in. Plus, I'm soft focus, which actually makes it look more like the real thing. So, but that's an accurate reproduction of the original. That's the one that Adam Savage has. And this scares my granddaughter to death, so she can't look at it. That and Moonwatcher, which I also have, that's another little story. So, because the guy that actually wore the mask came here to be on our podcast and asked to wear the mask, and that was like amazing moment, because I go back to when I was sitting in the audience watching the film for the first time, and they have these amazing close-ups of Moonwatcher, and little did I know that I'd end up meeting him and having him wear a recreation of that mask. It was just remarkable. I also got to know Gary Lockwood quite well, and he used to come over here all the time before he moved to Delaware. He'd come out, hang out, scare the interns. So.
Well, I think we've got some photos that you provided us, and maybe we'll put some of those share some of those, and you can talk a little bit about those. Like, I know there's one that looks like it's a King Kong film that you worked on that I was really interested to hear something about.
Yeah, this is commercial was done in 1984 for the Olympics when they were in LA, and it was a Transamerica commercial. There's other pictures actually showing me climbing, and they're black and white. I sent you showing me climbing the pyramid building, and people still remember that commercial. In fact, it's on my YouTube channel. I found it and I put it in my playlist. That was a very difficult shoot. I tried out for this. There were a whole bunch of guys in there with their gorilla suits. My gorilla suits tended to be a bit more realistic. They weren't the standard Hollywood type of gorilla. And Robert Abel, Rosie, it's okay. It's okay. My dog. Robert Abel really liked my suit and picked me. And then, of course, I made a new suit for the commercial to make it more King Kong-like. And that was another moment in my career, because I did a lot of Hollywood guerrilla work. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I've been in a lot of TV shows like St. Elsewhere and others. Worked with on The Last Precinct with a lot of amazing people. Adam West, one of my favorite people. So this was right around that time, and this was just amazing to play King Kong and stomp on buildings and climb towers and all that stuff. But that was shot in an old sound stage, and it was during summer at the peak of heat, and their air conditioner broke down.
Oh.
So I was really suffering in that suit. The sweat was coming out between my crotch from the heat inside. And I remember Robert Abel asking my late wife, "Is he taking a piss in there?" So did he go in the bathroom? I said, "No, that's his sweat. We'll get him out of it," because it was difficult work doing guerrilla work, but I really loved it. I even did some stuff for Johnny Carson where they put me in the San Diego Zoo and opened up in the morning, and people thought it was a real gorilla until I pulled off the head. It was full of Flora commercials. It was a part of my career that I'm very proud of, because I even got put in the Hollywood Gorilla Man Hall of Fame. So one of the few things I accomplished in Hollywood award-wise.
Did you, when it comes to being a gorilla suit actor, did you get any tips from your good friend Bob Burns, who was in the Ghostbusters, not the movie, but the TV show?
No, we actually worked together as gorillas once. I should have sent you that picture. Shows the two of us sitting there with our heads off. What was it? From Rags to Riches. It was a TV show series that was on back in the 80s, I think it was. And but we had known each other since the early 70s. In fact, the first time I met Bob Burns, I had my first gorilla suit, and I was at Equicon, which was down at LAX. And that was basically a Star Trek convention that B.J. Trimble used to put on, and I used to do all of those. And I had my first gorilla suit, and it was the costume party that they always had, contest. And I didn't enter the contest, but I just wanted to come out on stage with my good friend Dave Ayers on his gorilla suit. So we both come out in our gorilla suits, and we're on stage, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, out of the audience, jumps up this other gorilla, comes on stage with the beanie on his head, and that was Bob Burns. And he starts picking through my hair, eating bugs and stuff, and being Bob. And afterwards, we met, we had dinner together, and we've been friends ever since. So,
and for those that don't know who Bob Burns is, he has probably the largest collection of sci-fi and movie memorabilia and props since Forrest J. Ackerman, right?
Oh yeah, he does. And my favorite of all is the Time Machine, the original Time Machine. He does have some of my stuff in there too, like the mask that Doug Jones wore, the Doug Jones of The Shape of Water, Labyrinth, a million other things, Hellboy, and let's not forget Star Trek Discovery, Suru. Doug and I have been friends for years, and he did, of course, Mac Tonight for McDonald's, and I'm the one who sculpted and made the moon head. And Bob Burns, myself, my late wife, we puppeteered the facial expressions on the mask that he wore, and I had 2 of the masks still in pretty good shape, and he has those in his museum as well. So that's what really started Dougie's career.
And he also has the original armature from King Kong.
Yeah. Yeah, and he has the original spacecraft model from the day the Earth stood still.
Yeah. So if anybody's interested in that, you can go online to YouTube and just put in Bob Burns or Bob Burns Basement. There's actually a book. It says it that I own. It's called It Came from Bob Burns' Basement, or no, it came from Bob's basement. But if you go on YouTube, there's also a documentary that a friend of yours put out about Bob.
Yeah, there's even a model kit out of Bob.
There it is. Yeah, there you go.
There you go. And which I picked one up. I don't know if these are still available or not. I picked one up the other day, and it comes with both the heads. One is Tracy, which was sculpted by Rick Baker later, and the original head on the suit was Kogar. So it's pretty neat. I haven't had the heart to take it out of the box. It's still in its original wrapping. So, yeah, Bob is true.
Yes. Well, he you know, I just love that he actually saved these props because the studios were going to throw them away, long before people thought them to be worth money or something that people would want. He said, don't. I mean, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have the spaceship from the day the Earth stood still, or the airplane from War of the Worlds, or a lot of these things.
Yeah, he does have the airplane from War of the Worlds too, or the Chesley Bonestell backdrop from Earth to the Moon, and or Destination Moon, and just lots of stuff like that. So I built some. The last model I made for Bob was of the TWA Moon Rocket, quite large one. That was a kit that Captain Cardboard used to put out, and I lit it all up and everything, and it's still sitting in the museum now. I have one myself in the back corner over there, and I just love that rocket because I actually stood under the 70-foot rocket back in the late 50s, like 58, 59 when I was a kid, and just the stuff like that just sticks with you forever and really gets into your blood, which is why I'm so passionate about aviation.
Well, we've got a question from Air Hammer RC. He wants to know if you helped restore the Galileo.
No, that's an interesting story because I got an email one night from this lady who said she had it. Now, everyone thought it got bulldozed or something that had been destroyed, and she still had it. And sorry about the noise. That's WordPress. And she wanted to know who she could get it to, who would be the best people to get this to. And I said, well, you need to talk to Doug Drexler and my friend Michael Kuda. And I hooked her up with them. And that eventually led to, I forget who ended up with the end with the boat. Alan got hold of it. Alan, God, Schneider. And he's the one that ended up taking it over and taking it to the boat company and had it all restored. So I did not, that was my only involvement was getting her hooked up with the right people. So, but I was glad to be able to do that because she didn't know who to go to. She didn't know who to trust. And they had tried to restore it. They got so far, and evidently the job wasn't very well done. Yeah, that was. Now it gets even stranger, the story about the Galileo. When I first came to Hollywood, it was about 1973, 74, and I went to Loyola Marymount. There was a friend of mine there who knew people going to school there, and one of them was Roger Heisman, and he had this. It was in Palos Verdes, and it was in his front yard. Yeah, and I went up there and met him, and he had original uniforms, original props from the show. I'm not quite sure how he got them, but I know he got this legally, and because they were giving it away, if anybody would come and pick it up. So he did. He had the money. His parents had the money, and they carved the thing up and stuck it in the front lawn. And after a while, the neighborhoods complained about it, and he had to sell it. It went up. But I used to go up there in full Star Trek uniform and take pictures of us standing outside. We'd go inside, and so I'm very familiar with that relic.
Very interesting how some of that turns back up, and it's great. I mean, because I believe it's in a museum now. It got fully restored. It's in a museum.
No, it's in really good condition again. There really isn't much left of the original except the frame and some pieces of wood, but at least it survives. Yeah.
So I mentioned that I found out you were a modeler by watching Fright Night. So tell me a little bit about working on Fright Night with the great Roddy McDowall. I mean, just a completely great cast, and obviously with vampires, there's a lot of creature effects and stuff that you had to do. So what was that like?
Yeah, well, this picture here is of Chris, and he's in one of my early stages of makeup. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to do the final stage, but I did to do the stages leading up to it. Of course, Evil Ed's makeup, and it was great. It was a great experience. Most of the work I did was lab work and creating the prosthetics. And when I was on set, I would just hang out with Roddy. He'd be in his full Peter Vincent outfit, and we'd just talk about filmmaking. But Roddy and I, by that time, knew each other from two other projects. So, and one of them, of course, was Laser Blast. And with Laser Blast, of all things I worked on, I would say that Laser Blast and Ghostbusters is the most fan mail I get. People love that old film, and it was supposed to be campy and fun, and a lot of people didn't like the movie because they thought it was trying to be serious. How they ever thought that, I'll never know. But actually, for me, working on Laser Blast was, a Charlie Band movie was a lot more fun than working on Fright Night. Again, I got to be with Roddy a bunch, but also one day I was working on Kim Milford putting his makeup on, and in to the honey wagon comes Mark Hamill, and spent the day with him. What a nice guy. That was just, I didn't know they were friends, and he was super into the prosthetics and stuff and wished he could be made up as a monster. He kept telling me. So that was really cool. But of course, the first time with Roddy was on the Planet Apes TV show, and I'm in the long trailer where they had all the makeup chairs. And the first person of fame to me, a god, was John Chambers comes in. How you doing, man? Let's make some apes. He was this colorful Irishman character who he and Tommy Berman were the main drive between the look of those apes makeups and how they were done. And then shortly after that, in his bathrobe, came in Roddy, all charming, saying hello to everybody. And I stood over there doing a makeup on somebody, and I watched, Roddy being made up, and that was an amazing thing to be present for. You talk about, wouldn't it be neat to be a fly on the wall? I was more than that. And the reason I was working on that was because there were so many makeups in that TV show that they ran out of people, so they had to call the B list, So I was fortunate.
Yeah, I mean, Roddy was in every movie and then the TV show, and he must have went through a lot having to wear that makeup so much.
He didn't mind it. He liked to work. He loved what he did. He never complained. He was terrific. No one who ever worked with Roddy in the business could ever complain about Roddy, ever. It was like he just lit up the whole set. Everybody, he just was this positive force. He was amazing.
So we talked a little bit about that you did this Star Trek The Motion Picture, but then you also came back for the Undiscovered Country and did some Klingon appliances. Is that right?
That's true. I also worked on Star Trek Counter at Farpoint briefly. That was amazing too. But yeah, again, I did not get to work on the set. In fact, I was supposed to be one of the Klingons on the bridge, and I got bumped off by some producer's son at the last moment. That was like really disappointing because I always wanted to have a presence at least once in a Star Trek show, and I didn't get to do that because I'm SAG. I'm still getting a pension from SAG. I did a lot of work behind masks and puppeteering and that kind of thing. So that was kind of disappointing. And now on Counter at Farpoint, kind of another disappointment in a way. But I remember getting called from Gene's office to come down there. He wanted to talk to me. So I went down there and I met with Gene, and he had a scene where when they're inside that ship, this is a point where they don't know it's actually a living being. And these tentacles drop down and wrap around them. So he needed that done. And so he thought I could do that for him. And I did. And so we created the tentacles, and myself and an assistant and my late wife all puppeteered them. And what was really cool about that whole experience, I went down there several times to have meetings, and Gene says, I know you're a big fan and you love this stuff, and that's why I like to hire the fans, because you're the best people to work with. And he said, here's a carte blanche pass that you can go into any of the sets whenever you want, anywhere on the show. And he gave me 2, so my wife Jillian could have one as well. And I remember coming down to Paramount one day just to show her around the sets. And we walked in, and you could walk the corridors. The corridors had ceilings. They weren't like the old sets in the 60s that were open with all the lights hanging down. The sets were meticulous, and they were really beautiful up close and personal. And then I walked in on the bridge, and the bridge was all lit up, and they were working on it. And Mike Okuda, who I'd later become friends with, was putting on the commission plaque. I just have all these memories of this stuff. Of course, we did the scenes, and I worked with Jonathan Frakes, Marina Sirtis. I remember Brent Spinner, who was, I don't think, involved in that scene, but he was sitting off to one side and in uniform and makeup. And we had a lot of fun doing that. And it was very nice working with him, especially Jonathan Frakes. He was really a really nice man. But I remember looking at lunchtime and all of them sitting over there in their chairs in uniform. And I leaned over to Jillian and I said, do you think these guys have any idea what they're in for? She said, nah. I said, I don't think they do either, It was an amazing moment. Unfortunately, they cut the scene from the show because it gave away too soon that the ship was alive. They wanted to save that up. But I don't regret the experience, and I don't regret working closely with Gene again. That was really nice. So I treasure it.
Yeah, I mean, a Star Trek fan's dream come true. You lived it.
Yeah, no, I did. And I'm still in touch with a lot of the people that are still working on it to this day, because they were smart enough when they did the second and third season of Picard to bring back some of the old guard. Basically, I'm not going to go into a bunch of names, but basically the old farts were discarded. They had their time. And unfortunately, the fans were not really happy with the new guard because they really didn't get Star Trek. And I think it's clear to any Star Trek purist, especially if you saw the J.J. Abrams films, there just wasn't the Star Trek we knew. I'm trying to be kind here.
Well, obviously, in all the time that you worked in Hollywood, I mean, you've worked with or met a lot of famous people, and I think you made a statement to me that you walked past Sean Connery and that was fine, but it was actually meeting an aviator that really thrilled you. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was at a convention down by LAX, and I was in the parking lot going out to my car to get some supplies to bring back up to my table, and there's Chuck Yeager walking across the parking lot, and I'm like, Are you going to let this moment go by? Because I don't care who walks by me, like you said, Sean Connery. I'm not going to bug him. I'm not going to stop him. I will talk to him if I'm working with him on the set and stuff, especially if I'm working with him. But, I just wasn't that type. But when I saw Chuck Yeager, I said, you know what? You're never going to get this chance again. here's a real God. You got to talk to him. So I walked over as he's walking by, and I see him kind of looking at me, and I said, Chuck. And he says, who, son? Who? I said, General Yeager, sir. Yeah. I said, I'm a wingnut. Oh, heck, you got me. I said, I live, eat, and breathe airplanes. Okay. All right. So you want to talk to me? I said, well, can I? He says, hell yeah. So, an hour goes by. We're talking about airplanes. And what he wanted to talk to me about most, share with me, was how proud he was of his efforts in World War II. The X-1 was great. That was fine. That was a lot of fun and everything. But he was most proud of what he did in World War II. And I understood that. And I really do. What he did was remarkable. And, if you know the history of it, and I won't go into it here, but I'm sure many people watching this, since this is aviation, know what he did and how he got back in the air again. Even if it did mean getting on his knees to Eisenhower, he went back up. And so I think we're all very proud of him for that. But of course, everything he did after that was just amazing. And anyone else would have not survived that bailout from the F-104, the way he did. And trying to put his face back on long enough to go have some margaritas. I mean, really, he's like a mythical person, but he really existed. And when I shook his hand, I actually was corny enough to say, is that your stick hand? He said, yeah, it is. And I shook it. It was like sandpaper because it'd been burned so many times. And, his hands were like sandpaper. You could have sanded contest balsa with it just fine. But that was a remarkable thing. And then later on in the day, I went down, and there he was again. And he said, hey, and he wanted to come over and talk to me some more. And I remember, because I was at a UFO convention, and he was asking me a little bit about what I was selling, and I had sculpted some figures that I was selling of some of the alien beings. And after we're all done talking, he walked away, and I'm watching him walk away, and he walks really firm on the ground. He's got both feet on the ground very firmly. And he stops and he turns around. He says, by the way, son, I've never seen anything I couldn't identify. And then he winked at me and smiled and went like that. I'll never forget that. So,
wow. What an amazing
that was another great moment for me. Just meeting him. It's just like, the people who taught me to fly RC were pretty amazing too. One of them was Robin Hambley of Robin's Hobby in Glendale, which still exists. I think it's run by his son now. And George Lane. Robin, I believe, was a B-17 gunner on B-17, flew many missions over Germany. And George Lane was a P-40 pilot. And there's not many people around today that can say that their instructors were a P-40 pilot and a B-17 gunner. It's, that still blows my mind when I think about it. Yeah, because at the time I flew at the Sepulveda Basin, which is a pretty famous field. We're having a lot of trouble there now, so I have not been flying there. We have a new field up here that I fly at. But at that time, 1985, 1986, the 80s there, we were all flying craft radios and the gold Futaba boxes. And almost everybody there flying were former World War II pilots. Or they were involved, like my friend Kite Ken, they used to call him Ken Boucher, who taught me how to fly gliders. He loaded magazines on B-17s. I'm sorry, P-51 Mustangs. Another one was the Bombardier on B-17s. And he used to make bombs that we would drop out of our planes, our bomb drops, which upset people because they actually were pyro. We weren't supposed to do that in those days. I don't think we're supposed to do it anymore. But we kind of looked the other way because, the guy survived being in a B-17 all those years. So we kind of like, okay, he can do that. We won't say anything because no one ever got hurt or anything. But it was just an amazing time to get into this hobby because of the people who were behind it, the people who were training you, the people that the building that they did back then was amazing because, you know, there were Royal kits and there were Top Flight kits. And I'm forgetting some of the other great kits that were around, but any of you know what a Royal kit is, you really had to know how to build. It was a box of lumber, and you had to cut out parts, and then they had crush cut parts, and then later on they had stuff that was cut out a bit better, but you really had to want that plane badly, and we did, and we were all builders back then. Amazing.
I think you share with me you also got some encouragement from Colonel Thacker, especially when you were hesitant to fly your airplanes.
Yeah. He was amazing. Whenever we'd have a contest or an event, Warbirds event, or jet events, because we were flying Byron, F-16s and things like that with, nitro engines, motors, which were hard to keep running, and a lot of other ones. And he would show up with jets always. And I remember thinking back then, he was a pretty old guy then. And he only recently passed away, and he was building a turbine jet. My friend Lowell Wexler stayed in touch with him. They were very close. And the last thing that happened, like 2 weeks before he passed away, he called up Lowell to ask him about this turbine and how do I get this darn thing to work or something like that. But he would show up there, and he knew me. And if I was nervous staring at a new jet that I was about to fly, he'd say, "Well, Steve, you're going to stare at it all day or you're going to fly it." Then he'd laugh and march on by. He was a colorful, amazing character. And again, another World War II aviator. And I believe a Korean era aviator. I think he flew F-86s or T-33s. I'm not sure on this. Somebody will correct me, but I'm pretty sure he did. I remember having conversations about that. And Cougars. Yeah. And he always had a model like that. And we would spend a long time getting the motor to run. And you would zip off down the runway. We thought they were fast then. They weren't. We'd lumber into the sky, unload their weight a bit, get them on the step, and then move around pretty good. And then comes the landing, and you come around on the final, and you really hope you had your mixture set right, because when you throttle back a bit and you run short of the deck and you try to throttle back up to fly it onto the deck, it die. The up goes the gear and you hit the belly land it and the weeds and the dirt, It didn't always happen, but that question mark was always there every time you flew one. So we don't have that problem today with turbines and electrics.
For those that haven't read your I Am the AMA interview, because I haven't yet received their magazine, if I recall correctly, your wife, your late wife, is the reason you got into flying model airplanes, because you were given a gift in 1985, I believe, for Christmas. Is that right?
Yeah, it was 1985. Well, I was going to Robin's Hobby all the time to buy servos and radio gear and stuff for the creatures I was making. Even that King Kong suit had Futaba servos in it. In fact, I still have the radio from it. This was the second radio for it. There it is. I've never had the heart to throw this out. I still have the head too, although the skin is rotting away. But you can see on here that it says Gorilla. And that is from the King Kong Trans-American commercial and all the other TV shows that I did where I played a gorilla. And this is and I bought this at Robin's Hobby. And I used to look at the planes hanging there all the time. And I said to myself, one day I'm going to build one of these. And I remember saying that to Robin. She says, "Well, there's no time like the present." And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to think about it." Well, Jilly would sometimes go in there, and Robin and her got to be friends. And she kind of conspired behind my back with him, and she got me, under his direction, a Goldberg Eaglet, OS-25, and a radio just for that, and the Monaco, everything, And I remember that Christmas. I can see it now, the lighting in the room in the morning and opening it up, and smelling that engine and going, oh boy, I'm going to build one of these finally. This is going to get me to do it. And I did. I think about 3 weeks later, it was ready to go. And I started taking lessons with Robin and George down at the Sepulveda Basin. And I was terrible, and I was okay in the air. I would often screw up on takeoff and on landing, and we crashed a bunch of times and, would rebuild and make some more. And then one day I got a Mustang, and Robin says, you don't want to learn on it. No, that's right. No, the Mustang was the third airplane. I got a Goldberg Cub and build that. He says, you really don't want to learn on that. And I said, well, I got a little time on the other one. He goes, But I did. I did really well with the Goldberg Cub, and I did it up as the Hazel Sig markings with this blue and white sunburst. And I love that plane. And that plane taught me the most, and I got quite good with it. And then I got a Mustang. And then Rob was just shaking his head. You're going to a Warbird too soon. He was right. But I went through 3 Mustangs before I finally, one day, went down that runway on the center line, had total control over it, and was able to handle the rudder and keep the tail in the right spot and take off just beautiful and land just beautiful. And from there on out, it was smooth sailing, except for the radio interference, and the equipment would fail more back then, But now we don't have that problem with radio interference.
Right.
Well, yeah. Boy, do I love 2.4.
You mentioned Hazel Sig. She's actually going to be here a week from tomorrow at AMA because she just turned 100 earlier this year in March.
Oh,
and she's coming here to Muncie to come to our National Fun Fly. She's actually going to come in and spend Saturday a week from tomorrow with us. So the last time I saw her was about 3 years ago. She came out and got an award during the Nats. So she was here in Muncie about 3 years ago, and a week from tomorrow she'll be back again.
It's on my bucket list to get out there. Also, the big free flight Nats too to New York at that airport. I forget the name of it.
Yeah, right. Yes, you should definitely take part in both. So you provided me some photos of some of your hobby stuff. So maybe we could share some of those photos, and you could kind of talk us through a little bit about what we're seeing.
Sure. A younger me, that's in my backyard. That's a TA-183, and this plane was just something I wanted to do. So I made a plug. I made an epoxy, fiberglass epoxy resin mold of it, what we call a hard mold, and I made epoxy glass fuselages. I later sold kits of this. And this was right around the time people were starting to get turbines. So some of them had turbines. This particular one had a Wemotech 90 millimeter fan in it. And this was before Lipoly right here. This had, I think, an 8-cell brick, and I mean a brick of NIMS in it. And the first time I flew it was really a challenge. I took off. I made the plane very scale to the plans, the German plans, and it had anhedral in it. You can just see it there in the picture. And that was the real nemesis or the gremlin of this plane. When I took off, it kept wanting to flip on its back. I remember the guys telling me to stuff it. You're going to hurt somebody. It's going to come down in the pits, all this stuff, because it got away from me. But it was still, I could still hang on to it. And so I would manage to get it level. I throttled back a bit. I got it back level. It flipped on its back again. I got it level again. And I made a base turn onto the runway, and I throttled back, and it seemed to start behaving. And I magically got it onto the runway. And I just never forget it. I was shaking like a leaf. What we later found out was that the anhedral was part of the problem. The other thing that helped it is I put a wing gyro in it. And when I flew it the next time, it was fine. It flew great. And people were building them and flying them. A friend of mine has the mold. I don't know how he got it, Gene Haban. And Gene was nice enough to cast me up a fuse and send me one. So I will be building this plane and flying it again, especially with today's modern equipment. I'll be able to put a nice 12-bladed 90 millimeter fan in it, and some nice light polys, and some electric retracts, and it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it.
When you mentioned the free flight meet you wanted to go to in New York, I was trying to think of the name of it, and it's Geneseo. It's
Geneseo, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love free flight. We could talk about that later, but there's something about it. I like anything that flies. That is an Aquila. Now, that's a Grande, and I could not find a kit. Of course, after I scratch built one from plans with the help of Smith Brothers Hobbies, my great friends at Smith Brothers, Dave and Jason, I would take the plans down there, and they'd pick out all the wood for me, and they always had good selection of wood. And I get everything from Smith Brothers. I know I can buy stuff online cheaper, but I like supporting my friends in my local hobby shop, and the customer service is amazing. So I built this plane, and it's like a 103-inch wingspan, and flew it at the Bluffs in Goleta, where they have Weasel Fest every year. And I'm drawing a blank on the name of that location, but it's a high peak over the ocean, and there's pretty good lift there. And I still have this plane. I'm still flying it, but I'm actually thinking about making it electric powered, because I'll fly it more often now that I have a really nice field that's private with a lock and key and a paved runway. You kind of I converted a 93-inch span Sinbad to electric recently, and it's really fun to fly. So, but I love the Aquila. That is her engineering kit I bought from SIG. I buy a lot of things from SIG. That I converted to RC, and it has ailerons, rudder, elevator. And I built it 2 years ago, and then I was afraid to fly it. I didn't know if it would fly right or not. When I moved to Ventura after my late wife passed, for 9 years, I didn't fly much because there's no real place to fly up here until I found the Flying Circus Club, which I've recently joined. So I built things and then take them to a grass field somewhere local by, and I just didn't think this would work off of grass, and it probably wouldn't have. So after I got that field, you can see me standing in it now, I decided to fly it, and it just flew so well. I was so pleased with it. So now I'm building something a little tiny bit bigger, but it's a Peter Rake Fokker D8. I love the D8, and I'm in the middle of building that right now. It's all framed up, so I want to build a bigger one, a Balsa USA one next. So, but this little guy flies like a big airplane. It's unbelievable. I think you all know what that is. That's the E-Flight F-16, the 70 millimeter. And I hadn't flown in an EDF in a long, long time. I used to fly them all the time, and the nitro ones and the electrics early on. 2003 of the first electrics I flew, I had the T-33, but that thing scared the heck out of me. It was so fast but very controllable, and really responded well. It does not have a tip stall in its entire airframe. It just drops its nose. So it's easy to power it back up and just bring it on the runway clean as can be. I really enjoy flying that plane. That I do radio controlled submarines too. It's something I got really involved with in the 2000s, 2004 through 10. I built a lot of them. That is a 66-inch long Disney Nautilus, and I don't have that one. I sold it, and I got a smaller one because it literally became too heavy to lift in and out of the water once it gets filled with water. So, and we have to fly on FM, sail on FM, because 2.4 does not work underwater, not unless you have an extended antenna. So we're still using old FM radios. They work best.
I think that it's a very impressive looking, and I know there was also you even had a picture of it in the water, and
Yeah.
our museum director Michael Smith, he's getting into submarines. He's building one right now, and
Uh-oh.
yeah, he's gone down that path.
It's difficult. It really was. I found it really one of the more challenging aspects of RC modeling. The main thing being keeping the water out. And as good as you think you might be at it, it can always get in if it's going to find a way, and it's going to do it, and then you end up with a disaster on your hands. But usually we get them back, so it doesn't happen too often. And technology is getting much better. Nautilus dry docks really has some of the best cylinders that are ready made on the market in kits. Bob Martin, the old friend of mine. If you're interested in getting into radio controlled submarines, check out Nautilus Dry Docks, because he has everything you need. He'll pick up the phone and talk to you, and he will talk you through this difficult but rewarding hobby. Because when you first dive and go under the water, you can see into the water, and then you come back up again. It's really quite cool. This is my X15 Grande, and in the background is the smaller one. You can just see that is our kits that I offer that have been popular with the Rocketeers. I'm also a member of the National Association of Rocketry, and we teach kids and we hold launches for kids. If we can't get them interested in airplanes, they get interested in this really fast, and then they get interested in airplanes. Yeah, and this painting wasn't finished yet, and this is Vance Gilbert. And those of you in the AMA who are familiar with free flight and how amazing it is, will know the name Vance Gilbert, because he builds what we call megas. Megas are very large, bigger than that Breda 88 that I have, free flight airplanes. And he'll get these planes to go up and fly around like an RC plane all by themselves and make a beautiful landing right on the grass, just as clean as can be. And it takes a lot of skill to do that. And there are many people in the Flying Aces Club, FAC, that I'm a proud member of, that can do this. But then there are those who can just do it really the best, like Tom Holman, George Bredioff, and some of the other greats. He's one of them. And I just love Vance. And George had this on his Valeri Products model site that he has. I think it's valeriproducts.com, that has a very wide selection of free flight short kits and materials for getting into it. And he had put this picture of Vance on the FAC website, and I saw it, and I said, "Do you have that picture?" And he sent it to me, and it was bigger than what they were using. And it just struck me, because, here's this grown man, colorful character, out in the middle of this huge grassy field, this amazing sky, and it was the day before they were going to, or the day they were going to fly, and he's just going, "Look at this great sky." And it just, I don't know, it for me, it's what model aviation is all about, or aviation in general. And I wanted to paint it, so I painted it, and I finished it yesterday, and there's a lot more detail than put into it, but this shows most of the feeling of what I was going for. So, and it's simply entitled Vance.
And we featured him on the back page, and I Am the AMA, just like you're featured in the current issue. A few years ago, we featured him, and he's a great guy. Does he know that you painted it, or is it a surprise?
Yeah, he knows. I don't think he's seen the finished painting yet, but he will. He's not often on social media. He's a pretty busy guy with all the work he does in the music, but also his passion for building. He's always building something amazing, always. And they all fly beautifully. I mean, I've seen people build RC planes that didn't fly as well as his free flight planes fly. And anyone who's involved in free flight will know what I'm talking about. It's so challenging. And that's why I love doing it. And also it's peaceful. There's something about going out meeting with a bunch of crazy guys who love aviation. They've built these stick and tissue wonders. It's quiet. It's majestic. It's amazing building them. It's amazing flying them. You launch the plane, and when it flies well, you can sit back on the grass, put out your camera, and take pictures of it as it goes by. And you can't do that in RC, you know. I mean,
Right.
It's like comparing apples and oranges, but you know, they both have their their points to the hobby, you know, that they're different from each other, but yet the same. It's kind of hard to put in words, but I love doing it.
And you love slot cars.
I love slot cars. I've been running slot cars since the early 60s with my dad. He loved it, and he used to have a big track at his house in Marin County, and he was friends with people like A.J. Foyt, Eddie Sachs, Mario Andretti, people like that, and they would come over and have races in his back room, and I used to hang out with them. It was amazing. Sadly, my dad passed away when I was only 14 years old in a car accident, but I always loved the time I had with him in this hobby. It's always been special to me. So I race with a club called the Far Out Slot Car Club, and it's in LA, and we go to tracks much bigger than this home track of mine. They're wooden tracks, a lot of them. Some of them are plastic, but they're usually 4 lanes and up, and beautifully landscapes. And some of them are like the old wooden tracks you used to go to at hobby stores. And we go from track to track every other week, monthly, and race. And we just do it for fun, and we have a great time.
Now, you share with me, we didn't talk about this in the program, but you pretty much have retired from working on TV and film, but that doesn't mean that you're no longer still doing some of the things that you used to do. You're very involved in producing masks, and you provided me a photo of some of the masks, and you also have a video about your masks. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now in your studio that you're at right now.
Yeah, I remember the first time I made my first mask. It was just such a neat thing to do. You know, it's like the things you saw in movies, you could make the same and actually have it own, and that's never gotten old for me. So what you're seeing here is left to right. You're seeing the chameleon from The Outer Limits with Robert Duvall, and then the premiere episode, which was the galaxy being next to that, and not Architects of Fear. This is the episode with Martin Sheen, the creatures that was in that. David McCallum in The Sixth Finger, which was one of my favorite episodes. And then next to that is the Salt Vampire from the original Star Trek series. Then Baylock, and more recently, I did the Telosian from, the pilot, The Cage. And then, of course, they turned it into a 2-part episode for the original series called Menagerie, where they had the keepers of the Telosians that had Christopher Pike, who now has his own TV show, which is very good too. And yeah, the Telosian is the more recent one. And people who follow my work or fans of my work collect these. And even people who are not fans of my work, who like the old shows, want to collect the masks. I try to make these as close to the originals as possible. So I work from photographs of sculptures when I can find them, or pictures of the original masks that were taken in 35 millimeter. They were all done very crudely, because in those days, you know, television resolution was quite low. And on these TV shows, we weren't given a lot of time to make something. You usually, had a few days. It just had to look good enough for camera. But what was great about all these were done by Hua Cheng. Look him up on Google, Hua Cheng. He was very famous from Projects Unlimited, and he worked in Star Trek. He designed the phaser, the communicator, the tricorder, and also so many of the creatures that you saw. He was an amazing talent. He had a really great style. He had really great design sense, and it really shows. And I've always loved these things, so I started reproducing them. I'm also doing stuff from my own career, and that's what's coming out next. Some stuff from Ghostbusters and Fright Night and other things I worked on that they can collect. but I sculpt, mold, make these, and produce them here. I also still make films. I make films on my own. We have a lot of equipment, and we've made 3 films so far since I've been at the studio. We have another one planned later this year to shoot. So I'm keeping my hand in it that way. And every once in a while, I get called to work still. I'll work on something if I find it interesting. It's not about the money. It's about I like doing the work. So if a studio was to call me tomorrow and say, hey, we really like what you're doing, would you do this for us? It would really depend, not on their budget, but depend on the conditions and if I like the script and if I thought it would be something fun doing. So I'm open to that always.
Well, obviously you have a lot of hobbies, which is great, and it keeps you busy. And
yeah,
you even shared with me that it kind of it helps with keeping you motivated and your longevity. And you said other people that are retired and are just looking for things to do, and you're keeping yourself busy and enjoying all your hobbies.
But when I go to the field, and I go every Sunday to the Flying Circus Field here in Ventura, I fly with people from all different ages there. And there's one guy there named Rich, and I think he's 97.
Wow.
And he's a very colorful aviator. He's got thousands of hours in full-size aircraft. And he shows up there in his car, gets his plane out, and he doesn't fly little stuff. He flies big stuff too. And, tail draggers, stuff that's not easy to fly. And he gets them out and he tinkers on them. He goes on that runway and he goes as straight as an arrow down that runway, takes off, does a bunch of great maneuvers, comes in, makes a perfect landing and taxi back, and then sits down, hangs out with us and talks about flying airplanes and stuff. And, there's not many of these guys left, but having him there among us is so wonderful because he's a testament to having a passion for aviation or any other hobby, no matter what it is, gives you a longer life. It contributes to longer lives. And so, to the wives out there who may be or listening to this, who think, I wish my husband wouldn't spend so much time in the garage working on those darn airplanes all the time. Half the reason he's still out there doing that, or she, is because of that. Waking up in the morning and going, oh God, what am I going to build next? I just finished that D7. What am I going to do now? You go out, you have the maiden flight, you land. It's like, what's next, Ridley? It's just, it never stops coming. And so the hobby to me is so important for many reasons, but it definitely does keep you young, keep you getting up in the morning and keeping you active. And I'd be dead without this hobby. There's no question about it. I owe my life to it.
Well, people who want to follow along on all your adventures, you shared some links with us that we're going to share.
This is the main website that has my store on it. That has the masks, the items that we sell, also props from movies I've worked on. And I also have a blog going on there. So every day I write about what happens here, what I'm doing, what I'm working on. My customers can see their masks being made from the time they get poured up in rubber to the time that they get cast and then painted and put in a box and shipped out to them. I allow that to happen. They enjoy it, so they feel more involved. But I also talk about aviation and model projects and building. I cover a wide variety of subjects based on my hobbies and interests, but also have pictures up, a gallery of a lot of the things I worked on in the film business. There's a lot of stuff. Just look at the menu. And this is SNG Aero, which is really our Ventura Rocketeers, Section 855 of the National Association of Rocketry site. That's got videos of our launches and some of the rocket kits that I sell. I don't sell many, but I have a few that I sell that are popular. And this is a link to my YouTube channel. And I mean, there's everything on there. So I post pretty often,
Your YouTube channel is great. I mean, you share stories about working in TV and films, and then you talk about slot cars and model airplanes, and you had a great video you did at your flying field. I mean, I really enjoyed watching a lot of the videos that you.
Yeah, Viola Fields. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the city of Santa Barbara gave us permission to fly there, as long as it's not over 2 pounds. It's electric or rubber, no gas. And so there's a lot of park flyers you can fly there. Plus, I fly my gliders there. The Res 2-meter gliders, and we do some high starts there because we have a nice lawn to land on. So it's great.
Excellent. Well, we're just about out of time, but I wanted to give you a chance, Steve. I mean, we've talked, for about a little over an hour. Is there anything else that you want to chat about, or is there anything we haven't touched on about the hobby or the Hollywood and all the things you've done? Is there anything else that we should discuss?
That's telling me to pour rubber out. Mold. I think I pretty much covered all the bases, and of course, I've talked about how important the hobby is to me, and I know that this is shared by many of you watching this. That the hobby's a real lifesaver. The crazier the world gets, and it keeps getting crazier by the day. When I go to that building table, it's all gone. I'm just focused on the airplane, and I'm thinking about what's coming up ahead, and that's taking off the runway and having that wonderful experience that never gets old. I swear that so many other things in life get old, but every time I fly a new airplane that I've built, it's like it's the first time. And I don't think there's many other hobbies you can say that about. They're all great, but there's just nothing like flying an airplane. Whether it be free flight or it be RC, it's, control line. I've never done control line, but, my heart's with you guys that fly control line. It's just an amazing hobby. It's magic.
So model aviation is your live long and prosper.
Yeah, it is. And I got a lot of old guys I fly with that are proof of it. They're older than me, and they can't wait to get up the next day and work on that plane in the shop and fly it. It's just, it's amazing.
Before we wrap up, there were a few comments. They were asking about the Enterprise model behind you. So could you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, when Star Trek first came out, and I was in high school, AMT came out with their model kit. And I remember bringing it home and getting it out and going, well, that kind of looks like it. This isn't shaped right. This was wrong. And it's tiny, it's only like that big, this little thing, and it's like, I always dreamed about making a bigger one. So about 12 years ago, I have a YouTube channel going on. In fact, I don't have all the videos of this being made on YouTube. They're on a Vimeo account that I have, and every single 47 videos from the very beginning to the very end of it being made are on there. If you go to Vimeo and you search Steve Neill, you'll find it. And then I have a whole playlist that's just that. Eventually I'll put it back on YouTube. There were some issues with the music or something, I forget. But I decided, you know what, I'm going to make one, because I just got through, doing several. I did an F-104 from scratch that became a kit. I did the MEP 1101, which was a very successful flying. I'm building one right now, one of my own kits. And I did the TA 183. And I said, I can use that same skill to build an Enterprise. And so I did. And I built all the plugs for all the parts, all the sections, made silicone molds, some hard molds. And it took about a year off and on. It got stalled for a while, the project. And then Doug Drexler of Star Trek fame helped me financially with it, because I was going through kind of a dry period in my career. And he came over one day and he saw all the masters stuck together. It was all in gray, primer gray, sitting there, and goes, when are you going to finish this and mold it? And they said, well, it's going to cost me a few grand to do that. And he wrote me a check. This is the
Wow.
guy that was effects supervisor on Battlestar Galactica, the remake, which I thought was really good. Designed the Enterprise for Scott Bakula. The Enterprise was in the art department on Next Generation, and did a lot of designing on that. He also worked on, of course, currently he's working on Orville, redesigned the hangar deck for that, and a lot of other stuff. And he's working on Picard. And this, and he's a huge Star Trek fan, because that's what Gene and they did. They hired Star Trek fans because they were the best people to have work on the show, especially if they had talent like Doug. And yeah, he just wrote me a check, said, "Here, get it done." So I did. So I'll be forever grateful to Doug for that. Ironically, he didn't want one; didn't have the room for it. But, he could have had one anytime, but that's okay. I gave him a 66-inch long Nautilus model that I built and gave to him with the salon, and you look in and see the chairs and the organ and everything. So I built that then, and I made up about 11 kits, which are out there somewhere. A couple of them were built. I ended up building a couple for museums. One of them's in the Star Trek set tours with James Colley in New York. If you don't know about this, he did reproduction of the original Desilu Paramount soundstage sets. They're beautiful, and you can take a tour on them. They're all there: corridors, bridge, engineering, sick bay, all of it. And plus, he has a museum there, and he has this in it, and another bigger Enterprise that someone made. I'm sending him a set of Spock ears from the original molds, which I still have soon. So it's called the Star Trek Set Tours. I don't have the URL for it, but you guys are good with Google. Just type it in. James Colley, Star Trek Set Tours. And then there's one in a private collection, the guy's home theater, which is an actual theater in his house with like 100 seats, and he's got it hanging from the ceiling, all lit up. So I love doing it. I did it initially because I wanted that model. I wanted a big model of it. She's all lit up. The nacelles turned. I haven't turned off right now because they make a lot of noise. And I did it for that reason. I just had to have it. I did the same thing with the captain's chair, which is sitting here. And this is an accurate reproduction of the chair. I always wanted the chair, so I built one. And then Adam Savage built one. He made it louder than mine, more bells and whistles, but that's okay. So a lot of famous people have sat in that chair, like my friend Dorothy Fontana, who was one of the grand ladies of Star Trek, wrote many of the best episodes. Gary Lockwood sat in the chair and damaged it. I've left the damage. It's historical. And a lot of the Star Trek greats, Doug Drexler, Michael Kuda, a lot of people. So I've sat in that chair. So I'll never part. They can bury me in it, sitting in it.
Well, it's certainly been a pleasure to chat with you about your all your time on movies and TV, and also your RC experiences and slot cars and submarines and whatnot. So I definitely would encourage people to follow your YouTube channel and your blog. And I really appreciate you spending the time to talk about model aviation with me today, and obviously answer the questions for the magazine, and always looking forward to what you're doing next. So thank you so much for spending your day with us.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jay. And thank you, AMA. Thank you for preserving our hobby and making it still possible for us to fly. I've never needed to use your insurance ever once. I'm very grateful for that. But I feel safer with it than without it, and
absolutely,
and ever since Trust and all the new stuff that's come down, I know many people resisted it, were against it. I feel a lot safer now because I know that the people I'm flying with take the hobby very serious as I do. So we don't have injuries, we don't have accidents, and we don't have problems. And we have the AMA to thank for that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that. And obviously, we all love the hobby, and we want to do everything we can to support it, protect it, nurture it. So but I definitely appreciate you saying that. I also want to mention that our next episode of Model Aviation Live is Friday, July 15th. Because it falls on the 15th, it means you get two. You get AMA Air and Model Aviation Live will be on the same day. That's always fun for us. A little busy in the background, but it's great to have both shows at the same time. I will announce closer to that date who our guest is. And thanks everyone for tuning in. And I look forward to talking to you all in a month.